The lights blazed down on the arena, illuminating the thousands of fans packed into every seat, their voices a deafening roar of anticipation. The energy in the air was electric, a charged current running through the crowd as they awaited a showdown unlike anything they had ever witnessed. This wasn't just another wrestling match. This wasn't just another fight. This was a collision of two titans from different worlds, a clash that no one saw coming but everyone knew would be unforgettable. On one side stood Khamzat Chimaev, a relentless force from the world of MMA, a man who had left a trail of destruction in his wake, his undefeated record a testament to his dominance. On the other, Seth Rollins, the visionary of WWE, a master of the squared circle whose name alone commanded respect. Two warriors, two different battlegrounds. But tonight, there would be no rules, no divisions, only pure combat. Chimaev had made his name by dismantling opponents with ruthless precision, a fighter who never shied away from a challenge. He had called out champions, taken fights on short notice, and walked through some of the toughest competitors in the world without breaking a sweat. His rise had been meteoric, his confidence unshakable. He was a nightmare inside the cage, a man whose mere presence sent a chill through the welterweight division. But stepping into the world of professional wrestling, that was a different beast entirely. No one doubted his physical abilities, his strength, his speed, his suffocating grappling, but professional wrestling wasn't just about brute force. It was about presence, about mind games, about endurance in ways that were unfamiliar to even the toughest cage fighters. Rollins knew that better than anyone. Seth Rollins had spent years carving his legacy in WWE, a man who thrived on the grandest stages, who knew how to manipulate momentum in ways that could turn the tide of any battle. He wasn't just an athlete. He was a strategist, a master of deception, a performer who knew how to push his body to limits that few could comprehend. He had taken on giants before, men who were bigger, stronger, seemingly more dangerous, yet he had always found a way to win. But Chimaev? This wasn't just another opponent. This wasn't just another rivalry. This was an outsider stepping into his world, a man who wasn't playing by the same rules, whose mindset was built around absolute domination. Rollins had faced adversity before, but this felt different. The challenge had started with a single statement, a moment that sent shockwaves through both the MMA and wrestling communities. Chimaev, never one to back down from a fight, had casually mentioned that he could walk into a WWE ring and crush anyone in his path. The words spread like wildfire, igniting debates across social media, sports analysts, and die-hard fans from both sides. Could a fighter with no experience in the scripted world of professional wrestling really hold his own against someone like Rollins? Or was this just another crossover attempt destined to fail? It didn't take long for the challenge to be accepted. Rollins, never one to let a slight go unanswered, made it clear that if Chimaev wanted to step into his world, he would be more than happy to welcome him with a beating. The buildup was unlike anything fans had seen before. This wasn't just about sport. It was about pride, about proving which discipline reigned supreme. The UFC audience knew what Chimaev was capable of, but there were questions lingering in the minds of WWE fans. Would he be able to handle the unpredictability of the squared circle? Would he be able to match Rollins' endurance, his ability to dictate the pace of a match? And perhaps the biggest question of all, how much of this would be a show and how much would be real? There was no way to know until the two men stood face to face under the bright lights. The night of the match arrived, and the tension in the air was unlike anything the arena had ever felt before. The WWE universe, known for its passionate energy, was divided. Some were eager to see Rollins teach the outsider a lesson, to remind the world why professional wrestling was not something anyone could just walk into and dominate. Others were curious, perhaps even excited, to see if Chimaev's raw power could translate into the ring. Then, there were those who simply wanted chaos, who knew that no matter the outcome, this was going to be a war. The first notes of Rollins' theme music hit, and the crowd erupted. He stepped onto the stage with his signature swagger, draped in his elaborate ring gear, a confident smirk on his face. He was in his element, soaking in the moment, feeding off the energy. This was his home, his domain, and tonight, he planned to defend it with everything he had. But the moment the music shifted, when Chimaev's entrance was announced, the entire mood changed. There were no theatrics, no elaborate display, just pure intimidation. Chimaev walked to the ring with the same dead-eyed focus he carried into every fight, the same aura that had made him feared in the octagon. This wasn't a performance for him. This was just another fight. The bell rang, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Rollins moved first, circling, calculating, looking for an opening. But Chimaev didn't wait. In a blink, he closed the distance, his strength on full display as he launched Rollins across the ring with a force that sent shockwaves through the arena. The crowd gasped. This was real. Rollins scrambled to his feet, trying to shake off the impact, but Chimaev was already on him, a relentless force refusing to give him a moment to breathe. Every move Rollins tried, every attempt to create space, Chimaev countered with sheer physicality. This wasn't going to be a standard wrestling match. This was survival. But Seth Rollins wasn't a man who broke easily. He had been in the trenches before, faced monsters, and come out on top. He adjusted, using his speed, his experience, chipping away at Chimaev, looking for weaknesses. The question wasn't whether Chimaev could dominate Rollins in bursts, the question was whether he could last. Wrestling was a different kind of endurance, a different kind of pain, and as the minutes passed, the tides began to shift. Rollins found his rhythm, using the ropes, using momentum, turning Chimaev's aggression against him. The crowd roared as he hit his first major move, a thunderous superkick that staggered the MMA fighter. But just when it seemed like Rollins was taking control, just when the WWE universe started to believe he had figured out the puzzle, Chimaev did something no one expected. A move that defied the line between wrestling and real combat. A moment that would change the course of the fight in an instant. And in that split second, as Rollins tried to regain his footing, the entire arena knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Rollins barely had time to react before Chimaev exploded forward, his raw aggression breaking through the rhythm the WWE star had just begun to establish. The force of the takedown was unlike anything seen in a WWE ring before. No theatrics, no careful execution, just pure combat instincts. The impact rattled through the mat as Chimaev trapped Rollins beneath him, his grip unrelenting, his weight pressing down with suffocating pressure. The audience erupted into chaos, unsure whether they were witnessing an unscripted moment of dominance or if Rollins was truly in danger. This wasn't just another high-stakes wrestling bout. This felt real, unplanned, unpredictable. The energy in the arena shifted, an unsettling tension creeping in as Chimaev raised his fist. For a split second, it looked like he was about to abandon all pretense of wrestling and simply end the match with the kind of ground and pound that had destroyed his UFC opponents. But then, in a move that stunned even Chimaev, Rollins twisted, using the smallest gap to free his arm and shift his weight. It was the kind of instinct that only years in the ring could teach, a counter born from desperation and experience. He slipped out from under Chimaev's hold, rolling toward the ropes before launching himself forward with a burst of energy. His knee connected with Chimaev's jaw, the sound echoing through the arena as the crowd gasped. It was the opening Rollins had been fighting for, a moment to turn the tide. He wasted no time, capitalizing with a second knee strike, then a third, forcing Chimaev back, making the MMA fighter feel the kind of relentless offense that had made Rollins a world champion. The WWE superstar climbed the turnbuckle, the audience rising to their feet in anticipation. This was his moment. Just as Rollins launched himself into the air, Chimaev moved with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for a man of his size. He caught Rollins mid-flight, using his momentum against him, twisting and driving him into the mat with a counter that had never been seen in a WWE ring before. The impact was brutal. Rollins' body arched in pain as Chimaev loomed over him, his expression unreadable, his focus unwavering. But just as he moved in for the finishing blow, something unexpected happened. Security personnel rushed toward the ring, their presence sending a wave of confusion through the audience. At first, it seemed like they were responding to the intensity of the match, but then the cameras shifted, capturing the source of the disturbance. A figure had jumped the barricade, moving with purpose, eyes locked on the ring. The crowd erupted in a mixture of shock and excitement as the realization hit this wasn't just any fan. This was someone with a purpose, someone who had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The match had already blurred the lines between reality and spectacle, but now the situation had completely spiraled into something no one could have predicted. Chimaev turned toward the commotion, his focus momentarily pulled away from Rollins. And that single moment of distraction was all Rollins needed. With everything he had left, he lunged forward, his boot connecting with Chimaev's skull in a devastating stomp. The impact sent the undefeated fighter sprawling, his confidence shaken for the first time. The crowd roared as Rollins staggered to his feet, adrenaline fueling his every movement. But his victory was short-lived. The intruder had made it to ringside, and as the cameras focused in, the audience finally got a clear look at who it was, someone from Chimaev's past, someone who had no business being there. Before anyone could process what was happening, the arena lights flickered. The energy shifted once again, the chaos now reaching a boiling point. Rollins was hurt but standing. Chimaev was dazed but still dangerous. And outside the ring, an unknown force had just thrown every plan into uncertainty. No one knew what would happen next, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a battle between two warriors anymore. This had become something far bigger, and the night was far from over. A hushed tension settled over the arena, a rare moment where the energy of thousands seemed to freeze in place. The cameras focused on the intruder, his expression unreadable, his intentions still unknown. Chimaev, still recovering from Rollins' devastating stomp, turned toward the disruption with narrowed eyes. He recognized the man immediately. It was a former teammate, someone from his early days in combat sports, a name that had been lost in the chaos of his meteoric rise. The two had once trained together, fought alongside each other, but something had fractured their bond, something that had clearly not been forgotten. Rollins, still catching his breath, used the confusion to his advantage. He had spent years inside the ring, understanding that moments like these could change the outcome of a match. He backed into the corner, waiting, watching, knowing that whatever was about to happen had nothing to do with him, but if he played it right, he could turn it into his moment. The intruder locked eyes with Chimaev, then, without hesitation, slid into the ring. The crowd erupted, unsure whether this was a planned part of the show or something completely unscripted. Security hesitated, waiting to see if this was a setup, a planned rivalry, or if they needed to step in. The man said nothing. He simply extended his hand to Chimaev, a silent offer, a choice that would determine how the night would end. Chimaev, still dazed, but never one to back down, took the offer, but the moment their hands met, the man yanked him forward and drove a knee into his ribs. The entire arena gasped. No one had expected that. Roland's eyes widened as Chimaev staggered, betrayal flickering across his face. This wasn't just a surprise attack. This was personal. The man stood over him for a moment, then turned, nodding once toward Rollins before sliding back out of the ring. It was clear he had no interest in the WWE superstar. His target had only ever been Chimaev. Rollins didn't need an invitation. He had spent his career capitalizing on openings, and this was the biggest one yet. He sprinted forward, planting his foot and driving Chimaev's head into the mat with one final devastating stomp. The impact shook the ring. Chimaev's body went still. The referee hesitated for a moment, glancing between Rollins and the unconscious fighter, before finally dropping down to make the count. 1, 2, 3. The bell rang, and the eruption of sound that followed was deafening. Rollins had done it. He had survived the storm, endured the onslaught, and in the end, walked away with the victory. But as he raised his arms in triumph, there was no look of arrogance, no gloating smirk. He simply stood there, taking it all in, because even he knew this wasn't just about him anymore. Chimaev remained motionless for a few seconds before finally stirring, his eyes flickering open as he processed what had just happened. His gaze drifted toward the man who had betrayed him, now standing near the barricade, watching with an expression that held no regret. There would be no explanations tonight, no closure, just a wound that had been reopened in front of the world. Rollins stepped back, allowing the moment to breathe. He had won, but this wasn't just about a victory anymore. This was about something much deeper, something that went beyond the ropes of a wrestling ring or the cage of an MMA fight. Chimaev had come in as an unstoppable force, but tonight he had been reminded that no one, not even the most dominant, was invincible. As Rollins made his way up the ramp, the camera stayed on Chimaev, still kneeling in the ring, his breathing heavy, his mind undoubtedly racing. The crowd didn't boo, didn't cheer. There was only the sound of murmurs, of whispers, of speculation about what would come next. Then, just before the screen faded to black, Chimaev did something no one expected. He slowly turned his head, looked directly into the camera, and smiled. Not a smirk of arrogance, not a grin of defeat, but something else. Something that sent a shiver through the audience. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot.